Yes. All right. And thankfully, Tim reminded me that we have to read this statement. So here we go. The governor has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission to assemble in a single location. This meeting is being held utilizing electronic virtual communication with the Zoom software application and in accordance with virtual meeting procedures and policies as outlined in item 4.0-01 of the Virginia State Budget HB 29 as effective April 24th, 2020. All right. And now we're officially in session, and I am going to share my screen so that you can see our meeting packet. Oops, that looks like that's not right. There, does that look right? Is everyone seeing the CTAC agenda now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so normally Tristan, as our new chair, would be leading this meeting. Tristan, if you really want to jump in, feel free to lead things, but just because you're new as the chair and we are working with the Zoom software, I thought it'd just be easier if I run things today, but we will totally let you take over for the next meeting, whether it's online
like it makes sense to me. So thank you.
Perfect. Great. So we normally have time for matters from the public, but we do not have any members of the public joining us today. So we will move past that. Next, we would normally do meeting minutes, but I apologize, I still haven't gotten our meeting minutes drafted from January. So those will be available along with this meeting's minutes at our next meeting. So now we're going to move into the MPO documents. Sandy, Lucinda, do either of you have a preference for who goes first?
Lucinda, you're listed first if you want to start.
Sure. So the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, is up on the website and it's up on the screen now. We did have a public hearing in the March Policy Board meeting, and we had a pretty lengthy discussion about some of the details of the programs that are in the TIP, and since that it was updated, and I added in some more descriptions to the blocks that kind of give more of a description of what the projects are. So this is a 4-year project. It goes to 2024. It lists out the projects. It's kind of like the budget for what the state is going to be spending their money on for funding transportation projects. So it's up for review and comments, and then I think that, Jessica, this committee can make a recommendation to the policy board in the next week's policy board meeting. We're going to ask the policy board next week to approve it and make it official. So if anybody has any questions, now is a good time.
So just a quick jump in before we have any more discussion. If we had quorum, we could make an official recommendation. It could be something that you can vote on. Without quorum, you guys can have a discussion about how you feel about the TIP. You can ask questions. You can decide amongst yourselves that you have sort of a pseudo recommendation, although it wouldn't be official, and Tristan or Stuart or I can share that recommendation with the policy board at their next meeting. Any questions?
I was going to ask if staff can kind of highlight any of the biggest ticket items in the TIP.
Okay, can I control this? Is that?
There's probably a way. I'm going to make you a co-host and we'll see how that goes.
All right. It's kind of a dry document. Oh, okay, I'm the host now. So let me see. I don't think I can
No? Okay, well, tell me what page and, oh,
All right, yeah, so if you just scroll up to the beginning of the tables, let's- so it's broken out into the VDOT road projects and then the 2 transit projects. So these are the VDOT road projects here. Just scroll to the beginning of these, Jessica.
they
There
just
you
keep
go.
going. Okay.
Nope, there. Yeah, so this is the cover kind of for the VDOT projects, and it says how much that we're going to spend in each category. And it also lists the funding sources, and most of the funding is from the federal government. So if you can scroll to the next page, Jessica, please. So these are the interstate projects. So some of them are grouped together. So this one is, is microtransit, is a new one this year. And it's a innovation and technology transportation fund that is statewide. So I think it's stuff like, I'm like, unfortunately, I don't know a lot about it, but I think it's like software and technology to reduce congestion. So measuring how many cars are on the road and then maybe doing congestion pricing and stuff like that. It's kind of more looking into the future of transportation in that way. It's run by the state, so it's not really kind of related to the MPO. It's just a amount of money that every area is putting in to that project. And then these primary projects after the interstate project are specific projects. So you might recognize some of them. Route 29 widening and corridor improvements was part of the Route 29 Solutions project that has been going on for quite a while. And that money is, they don't have like any money allocated in there. So you could see like the FY 21, 22, 23, and 24, there's no money in there. So there, at the moment, this project's not funded. We would like it to be funded, but we have to apply and try to find funding for it. I think that we're working on one of the smart scale application is going to address the 29 project. And so hopefully we will get money and then that to the TIP and the state funding as well. So like the next one is Rio Road Grade Separated, and you can see that that one is funded for 2021. Keep going, Jessica. Let me see. And then some of these, like this one here, it says in the MPO notes, it says that the project's been completed and they're just waiting for closeout. So this was completed before 2021. It was completed in the previous TIP. So we're just trying to, that we have to keep it in there until it's closed out. It's just kind of a record thing. And then there's some urban projects, and keep scrolling to the next page.
I have a question.
Sure. Just a request real quick. If you are not on mute and you, could you please put yourself on mute? Unless you're Lucinda.
Let's see. Yeah, so these are like landscaping and just some improvements to intersections. Next page. And then I guess we can keep going to the transit projects. So actually stop here. So these are groupings where they've grouped things together too. And so this is a lot of bridge maintenance and stuff like that. And that's just kind of like on a schedule, and it just happens automatically. The state decides, you know, what needs to be updated. They kind of have a list of what they need to do, and it gets done. So those are like the bridge and things like that, and they're grouped together. If you have a question about a specific bridge or maintenance item, you can ask me or Chuck from VDOT, and I'll ask Chuck and we can find out, you know, more information about that. And and then scroll down to the transit projects. So the transit is broken out by Kat and Jaunt. So this is good right here. The transit summary lists the programs that they're funded through. So FTA is the Federal Transit Administration, and these are all the different funds that are available. And then it lists the amount that we expect to get in the next coming years. And you can just keep going to the next page.
Quick question.
Sure.
In the last MPO meeting that I went to, we were discussing some options on 29 around, I think it was hydraulic. I was wondering if any of that has been decided on under the options where we're at, and if it's reflected here.
Yeah, so it won't be reflected here because it's not funded yet. But they did decide to apply for a 29 project within the hydraulic intersection area, grouping a bunch of them together as a smart scale project. So every 2 years, the state has money available. It's $20,000 for the Culpeper district. So that's, and you know, that's us plus a bunch of other
20 million.
Yeah, sorry. 20 million for the Culpeper district. So that's not very much money. And if you look on the MPO website, there's a smart scale workshop that we had that has a link to the 29 hydraulic project. And that has more details about the project that they decided to go with. They are, like I said, they combined a bunch of them together. So, you know, they were considering doing an update. Oh, gosh. You'd have to look at the description, the project description.
Lucinda, you want me to give a real brief?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's okay. It's good.
Chip, I just want to, I think this smart scale is on our agenda for later in the meeting.
Oh,
is that
okay.
already planned to be covered?
Good, yeah, good. I will say regarding the tip, if you'll look on page 24, there are 2 Route 29 projects on there that one's $10 million and one is $8 million. Those 2 are committed that should we be awarded the smart scale projects this round, that $18 million will be contributed to those projects. But that 18 million can only go to the Route 29 and hydraulic improvements. It can't be moved anywhere else. So those 2 tip items are commitments towards Route 29 and hydraulic.
Chip, do you have a sense if we did not get recommended funding in smart scale, if we'd still be able to immediately use that money to pay for some subset of the projects?
No.
Only through smart scale, they're saying?
Any new projects have to go through smart scale.
Mm-hmm.
Our understanding is that if we aren't awarded projects this round, that 18 million will go back into the state pot next year.
All right, well, thank you.
Sure.
Do you want to go down to transit? So, and I guess, I don't know, then there's 2 sections where the next page just thinks. So Kat, I added this summary here that kind of talks more about what Kat's planning to do in the next coming years. Even though they're not expanding, they want to increase their fleet because it takes a long time to get a bus and they need to plan ahead and replace older vehicles that are not going to be working anymore. So we added that summary there. And then if you scroll down, John added a bunch of stuff, explanations. That's still Kat. So this page here, they talk about they're replacing their buses. And then John added a little summary to their project, but then keep scrolling. They added in a bunch of descriptions here about the funding that they're seeking and why they're funding it. And again, I don't think either one of them are making any major changes. Just, getting buses to keep their systems going.
Lucinda, one of the fairly sizable, I mean, it's not huge, but it's still sizable, but very important. CAT has in the tip new rider counting mechanisms, technology. They have for quite a while not been able to calculate their ridership very well because of faulty equipment, the wrong equipment, something. And so the Department of Rail and Public Transportation has agreed to fund new ride counters for all of CAT's buses. We attempted about 2 years ago to produce monthly ridership reports for CAT and Jaunt, and their numbers were so far off. I mean, there would be 30,000 ridership variances just on the free trolley alone. And so what's in the tip hopefully will help to improve that.
Jessica, I've got a comment and a question.
Go for it.
The comment is that I think that the Jaunt is so much stronger than the CAT in the way it's presented. It's staggering how much clearer it is with what they're asking for. I don't know whether that has any bearing on what will ultimately happen, but just a comment. And then the second one is kind of building on Chip's point, and that is, do we have any sense of what's going to happen to how the counts, with a dramatic decrease that there appears to be in ridership and public transit, how that will be looked at by the state?
Well, currently, and it could not have come at a worse time, this year was the first year that the state has begun to really base a transit systems grants on their ridership numbers.
Oh, wow.
CAT's was already decreasing to a point that DRPT funded the difference. CAT would have lost money from their previous year's funding, but the state filled that gap for the current year, knowing that it would be really hard for a system to lose money, lose revenue sources. It's kind of really up in, nobody knows next year because all the systems will be so far below what their ridership quotas were. Whether DRPT will honor the current regulations or whether they'll give some type of a waiver. But of course, the other part of it is with the state budget being lower than what it normally is, they're going to be looking to cut funds too. So that's a long answer to say we really don't know yet what the state's going to do.
And at the national level, there is less support for mass transit.
Yes, you've got, I think the last numbers I heard, CAT was down 60% or more. Nationally, one of the numbers that's scary for me is that with a national survey, 57% of the people who routinely ride public transportation have said they will not ride public transportation as the COVID wears on. They don't want to be with large numbers of people in a contained space. I'm scared what that's going to do for the immediate future as well, once COVID kind of wears itself out.
Chip, did you also want to talk really briefly about the CARES Act and how that's impacting budgets in the near future?
Yes, luckily, both Jaunt and CAT have received very close to 1 year's operating funds through the CARES Act, the supplements from the federal government. I think CAT's was in the neighborhood of $7 million and Jaunt was over $3 million. So that's going to make a huge impact and benefit to the two systems while they're going through this transition. But nobody knows if that'll be enough.
And I'll just let you guys all be aware that if this will be discussed at the RTP meeting coming up next week, Thursday. I can include it in an email if you're very interested in how the transit companies here in town are planning on dealing with the situation moving forward.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear that.
I would also.
Great, I will make sure to send that out.
Thank you.
Lucinda, is there anything else you wanted to share about the tip?
No, so the tip does get amended and updated as the state reallocates funds to projects. So
Okay.
the moving
So-
document.
Great, thanks, Lucinda. In terms of CTAC's role and your recommendation, I think the recommendation typically would either say that CTAC supports the tip as it is written, or you can identify any particular items that you have further questions about, or that you feel as a committee is perhaps like maybe too much or too little or something like that.
So this is Stuart. So as it is presented here, is this final and we're just commenting, or is this still a work in progress?
Hopefully it's final. It's not approved by the policy board, so it could change. If people have comments or questions and ask to make a change, it could change. It's also a fluid document, so even after it's approved, the numbers do get adjusted.
Any other questions? Does anyone want to make a recommendation? Again, this cannot be an official recommendation from CTAC, but it can be something that is still mentioned to the policy board.
Jessica, I think our bylaws say that that any recommendations would come from the individual members.
Oh,
Right.
that,
Like as a group. A group could still be considered a vote, but members could make recommendations.
okay. So Chip, would that leave us in a position where individual members need to email the policy board to state their position, or is there some other way of doing that?
I would say the easiest way would be to email you and let you just put them together
Okay,
and send it to the policy board.
great. So that gives you guys more time to review the tip, take a look at it more closely, or ask any questions that you can email me and I can pass them along to Lucinda. Or you can send me your recommendations, how you feel about the document, and anything that stood out to you.
Jessica,
right.
is there a timeline we're looking at here?
So the policy board meeting, as noted on the agenda, is coming up. Oh, wait, do I have this right, Lucinda?
It's May 27th.
I missed May 27th meeting. So
Yeah.
so I'll amend this and I'll include it in my email that reminds you guys about the RTP meeting. May 27th is please have that to me by like lunchtime that day.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, concerns regarding the tip? All right, next we'll move on to Sandy and the UPWP.
Thanks. I'm gonna pull it up on my computer. I'll just be very good about letting you know where I am in the document so you can
Okay.
follow along, Jessica, if that works for you.
Sure.
So basically, every year when we get funding from the FTA and FHWA, which is filtered down through the state organizations of VDOT and DRPT, one of the things we're required to do is create a work program about what we're going to be doing with that planning money. And so this document basically goes through our plans for projects and cost allocations, how our time's going to be utilized, and what this MPO money is going to be funding. So there's a whole process involved in putting this plan together. We have submitted it both to VDOT and DRPT for an initial review. So they've already received it and it meets their criteria. And then there's a process that we go through to let the various MPO committees review it. And then the MPO policy board holds a public hearing on it, which is also scheduled for next month. And they officially adopt it. Again, just like the TIP, this is our best guess on what, where we think that the allocation is going to go. It's very possible that through this process, we're going to end up realizing some projects are going to be more work than others, or something might come up that's not on our radar right now that ends up being a really big priority. And so there's a process where we can have another public hearing to amend the document if we need to revise it at this time. So there are those processes in place. So the first couple pages of the Unified Planning Work Program are background information, its purpose, what the MPO is, the requirements that it's supposed to reference, that kind of thing. What goes into the work program, the kinds of things we're supposed to consider. This is pretty boilerplate, but if you haven't, if you don't know much about the MPO and about the types of things that we do, this is really good background information to get sort of a broad understanding and what all these different documents are. On the bottom of page 6, I do want to mention that one of the things that is included in like the MPO guiding documents is a public participation plan. And we're also required to have a Title VI plan. And I just want to mention that because we are going to discuss strengthening our public participation plan here in a little bit. But it is important to note that we do have a plan to make sure that we consider and not just check the boxes, but really strive to make sure that we are being inclusive in our planning efforts. So if you go down to the next page, which is page 7, the top of it says funding. That just explains where our funding sources come from. 10% local funds, 10% state funds, 80% federal funds. So the MPO includes the city of Charlottesville and the urbanized portions of Albemarle County. Every locality in our planning district contributes based on their population into a fund to support the PDC. And so there's an equation that we go through, and that's what provides the local fund match for the federal and state funds that we receive. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that page where it has the program funding by source, you'll see that we've broken it up into how much we receive through the PL. That's the VDOT money. FTA is the DRPT money, so that's for the transit projects. And then at the bottom, it has that total, and that's for our work. And then there's the VDOT money, and that's basically to support the work that VDOT staff puts in to support our programming. And then there are 3 main categories. You'll see the funding by task in that table right below it. There are 3 main categories that we break all our tasks up into. Task 1 is administration, so things like meeting management, making sure the website is updated, making sure that we process all the documents that we're supposed to, that we put this plan together, that we, our staffing committees, that kind of thing. Task 2 is the long-range planning. So that's things like the long-range transportation plan, any sort of like bigger scale project we put in that. And then task 3 is the short range planning. So we'll go through what we're including in those tasks, but that's the general breakdown, and it shows our funding allocation based on this proposed work program in each of those areas. So if you scroll down, there's just a page about the projects that we've worked on this past fiscal year, the coordination of the Route 29 solutions. We've been doing a lot with Smart Scale. We had some really good public engagement. We've been doing a lot with some bicycle corridor evaluation that's been sort of incorporated into Smart Scale, but there are some additional efforts that have been underway there. Regional transit planning, that is the work that we do to support the Regional Transit Partnership, as well as other aspects of what we do related to transit planning, including cooperation with the planning districts out in Waynesboro. And then the tip, which Lucinda just covered, performance measures, we talked about that. I'll talk about those again here shortly. And then the regional transportation revenue study. This was a project where we were evaluating what other areas, Lucinda was working on this, to determine other areas of the state, to determine what opportunities there might exist to increase the types of revenue and revenue sources to fund transportation projects in our area. So there's a lot of background research being done, and then the General Assembly passed some new laws that would increase the gas tax revenue that was being collected, and then we got hit by a global health crisis. So that project is, we're just trying to get what's already been done to a point where we can formally kind of wrap it up for now, pending additional information that comes as we work through our response to COVID-19, what that might do to change our budget, what that might do to change people's travel behaviors, that kind of thing. There's sort of a lot that's up in the air right now. So we're going to take what we have, put a cap on it, and sort of have that to come back to when we're in a position where that makes sense. So that's what we just finished. So then we'll get into, if you go down to the next page, just the administrative tasks. These are pretty normal. Every year we do this. These always are in the document, just things that we have to do. You know, complying with regulations, making sure that we submit the documents, making sure that we're invoicing. That's A. B, committees, staffing. That's what pays for Jessica and Lucinda and Chip and me to show up to these meetings. Information sharing, that's maintaining the website, attending webinars and seminars, and with both the cross-jurisdictional communication covers this as well, both with localities in our area and also with other NPOs across the state and VDOT and that kind of thing, just to help make sure that we all know what we need to know to continue to service the organization. And then public participation has been a really important one, especially as we've been talking about changing the way we do outreach in light of the pandemic, when we can't have physical meetings. You know, the standard was kind of, you have 2 hours in a room and you put a notice in the newspaper, and whoever shows up, that checks your public engagement requirement. And really that's not, while that's standard and that technically meets the requirements for a lot of what we have to do, we found out through the Smart Scale webinars that there are a lot more opportunities with the virtual meeting that makes it more accessible to a lot of people. We had 64 and 74 on the 2 meetings respectively, I think. So there was really great turnout. We had really good engagement. And the other thing we really want to make sure that we do is that we are meaningfully engaging and making sure that the needs, and I know this group has highlighted this as a major concern, highlighting the needs and making sure that those needs are considered in more traditionally underserved communities. And so we really want to look at how we're disseminating information, building relationships and contact lists with organizations and agencies that work with or in neighborhoods that that have contact with minority groups, people with disabilities, low-income households, that kind of thing. And so that's something that we're going to update our public participation plan to make sure that that is covered a little bit more effectively, but we're also going to spend some time looking at our practices in addition to see what we can do to improve in that area. And then F, online resources, that's just sort of the maintenance of the website, making sure that we have ways for the public to access that and that information gets shared. So before I move on, are there any questions or comments on the administration part of it? Cool. Okay, just want to give a little break. All right, so as far as the long range planning, we talked about a couple of different projects. One of the things is that as we've kind of been, you know, learning as we go, because we have a lot of new staff members, we realize that there's a really good opportunity to make information more digestible and accessible to people by simplifying the way that it's presented so that you don't have to go to a highly technical document to be able to understand what the purpose of some of these programs are. So we have funding allocated to develop the series of what we're calling 101 primers or one-pagers. And the idea is that these will be a series of just informational documents that are about a page that at a very high level provide background information on the various programs. So if you're new to a committee, or if you're trying to explain what a performance measure is or what a tip is or something like that, there will be a document that summarizes what it is, why we do it, why it's required, that kind of thing, to just make it a really easy entry point for people to understand what it is what the purpose of this effort is, and how it's useful and what it's used for, and hopefully reduce a barrier to engagement by simplifying and making it just really just easy to glance over and access versus, you know, words in a long document at the beginning of a page where you have to sort of brace yourself to kind of go through something that you feel is going to be a little bit more technical. It was very clear that we needed to do a better job of communicating safety performance measures, and there are other performance measures that we have to provide updates on regularly as well. And so we wanted to include money in the budget to spend some time really diving into the purpose of these measures, what the implications are for meeting the measures or not meeting the measures, why they're important, how they're used, that kind of thing. And so we set aside a significant portion of funding to be able to conduct this analysis so that the next time this comes around, we'll be able to communicate and share that information better with all of the various committees. We heard you all loud and clear that it was confusing and we didn't understand why we were just going along with the state and that kind of thing. So we really want to spend some time so that we can answer those questions more, I guess, satisfactorily in the future. Jessica is going to be working on doing some bike and pedestrian counts, working with VDOT to use some innovative technologies like counters and things like that, but also coordinating hopefully with a volunteer basis to get additional information. And then if you go down to D, this is another one that was really important, is equity and transportation. We really wanted to spend some time thinking about what factors do we need to consider and identify which communities are most likely to be disengaged and overlooked in the planning process. And so some of the things we want to think about are you know, what are the criteria that would establish somebody as living in a community that is largely underserved? Is it income level? Is it race? Is it not a native English speaker? Those kinds of things. So we'll be spending some time, and you all will probably be enlisted to help us develop what that criteria is. And then we'll start overlaying all these additional criteria to see which areas have more than one of these factors, and start building sort of a map to help us show where we really need to make sure that we're being really intentional about including those communities in our planning process, especially when projects are likely to impact them or be in close proximity. There's money in the budget to support regional transit and rail planning that supports the RTP largely. You know, we want to assist with Jaunt and the transition from Greene County to Jaunt, which would have connections with Albemarle County. We're doing work to hopefully get some additional funding to support the planning process for the Amtrak station in Charlottesville. And then there are some other various intercity projects that we're supporting. We also put in some money for an electric vehicle charging station needs assessment. So as electric vehicles take up more and more of the market share, we want to start working on identifying where the charging stations are and where the gaps are, so we can start trying to identify places where there might be opportunities to support that infrastructure. And then the last one under long range is the Route 29 North Corridor study. And this would be a combination of urban and rural funding to help support improving transportation patterns through northern Albemarle County and into Greene County, and making sure that that's a coordinated effort. Any questions on those projects?
Great summary.
Thanks.
Yeah, no questions. I'll just note I'm glad to see a lot of those on there, like the 101 primers, the kind of thing we've talked about a lot, and also the need for better bike ped numbers, equity in transportation, and then the EV charging station needs assessment I also think is going to be very important. So
Cool.
just seemed like a good list to me. So.
Awesome. So then just real quickly, the short range projects are, a lot of it is just continuing to work on improving the transportation improvement program. Lucinda did a really great job of adding in some of those additional notes to make it a little bit more accessible to explain what those projects are and what the funding will cover. So that was really helpful. It makes it, I think, a little bit easier to follow if you're not familiar with it, or even if you are. Short range project planning, this is mostly going to be supporting the finalization of the smart scale applications, but we also use this to attend quarterly meetings with VDOT and the other MPOs, which are just topical, you know, as needs are. That's a good opportunity to sort of stay up to date on changes and regulations and policies and reporting. Travel demand management that helps support rideshare, regional transit partnership we talked about already. And then just we have general funding for on-call services. So Albemarle or Charlottesville calls us and they need something. We just sort of have money built in the budget so that those kinds of on-demand things are built in.
Can I just ask on travel demand management, is encouraging like private employer telework something the NPO does? It just seems like a very pertinent topic given our current situation, and one that a lot of companies seem like they're starting to realize is more of a viable option these days.
Yeah, I think one of the things we put in the rideshare work program actually was to look at that there is a separate grant opportunity specifically for telework coordination, or not telework, but employer outreach programs. And so one of the things we'll be looking at is can we find additional funding to support those programs? Rideshare itself, Jessica can tell you better than I can, but rideshare itself is very specific about what you can use those funds for. So anything outside of those very, very, very specific guidelines, we have to fund through a different way. So this would help support looking for additional funds or letting us know that those funds aren't available and we need to try to incorporate it into, funding that we already have.
I think you will see a lot of promoting work from home in the next few months. You'll see a lot less with the ride share type of promotions and a lot more of the work from home.
Do you all have any other questions? So this is scheduled for a public hearing with the MPO Policy Board next Wednesday at the May 27th meeting. Hopefully they'll be at a point where they can adopt it at that point, and this will formally become what we work on for the next year. And again, if something happens and we need to reallocate funding, then there's an amendment process for this.
So Chip and Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, but CTAC again can make a recommendation regarding the UPWP, and would that also be done like on an individual member basis? Great. So feel free to ask Sandy any other questions you have right now, but also if you have additional questions that come up later, or you would like to make a personal recommendation as a CTAC member, please feel free to email me. And again, I will send out an email reminding you of the upcoming May 27th meeting. So just get me your recommendation by about noon that day. All right.
If I could just make a quick comment.
Yes,
Having
please
looked
do.
at some of these in past years, I just want to applaud you all. I think that both in terms of clarity of presentation and in terms of content and trying to sort of spread beyond the norm. I realize these are unusual times and that they may not be as successful as we would hope because of that. We have no idea what the variables are. But I think these as I reviewed them earlier, look like two quite handsome documents. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. All right, if there aren't any other questions or comments, we'll move on to Smart Scale updates. We are going to probably go over what I had initially hoped would be a 1-hour meeting. However, typically these meetings go until 8:30. So I think if you have to bow out early, please feel free to do that. We can't make any official votes anyway. But for those of you who can stick around, we will continue with the conversation about Smart Scale and then really briefly on membership. So Smart Scale, Chuck, did I see you are on this call? Would you like to talk a little bit about where we are in the Smart Scale process?
Sure. This is Chuck Proctor. I'm the Culpeper District Planning Manager and the Smart Scale point of contact. We submitted 42 applications across the district. I think the MPO and the Albemarle County and the City of Charlottesville and the PDC each submitted 4 applications each, and they've all been received, and I've done the initial validation on all of them, and they're proceeded to central office for the final review and validation. So we should be getting their response back probably next week at the latest, and then we can start working on the developing the final applications for submission in August. We had a meeting, I guess the MPO and the Albemarle County and the city and the TJPDC had a public meeting last week on Wednesday and Thursday where they presented all of the projects for public input, and Lucinda can probably fill you in on some of the details, but we got a lot of comments back on the projects, and we're going to go through the process of reviewing those and providing some answers to all the comments. So more to come on that. We can go through the individual projects, but unless there's some questions, specific questions about some of the projects, we can move on. I don't know how you wanted to move forward with this.
Lucinda, did you want to talk about the comments received and how those meetings went on the 13th and 14th?
I would love to if you guys have time. I'm gonna try to share my screen and see if I can do this. Yeah. And show you guys a page on our website that I think might be really helpful in looking at the projects that we submitted. So as I said before, through Smart Scale, it's every 2 years we can apply for the funding. It's $20 million. And so we did a workshop last week. It was broken out into two different sessions, Wednesday and Thursday night. And there's a total of 16 projects that we can submit, like 16 slots for proposals from our area, from the MPO area. So we did the MPO and the TJPDC projects first. Each entity can have there's 4 slots for the MPO, there's 4 slots for TJPDC, there's 4 slots for the city of Charlottesville, and there's 4 slots for Albemarle County. So we did 8 on Wednesday night and 8 on Thursday night. And you can see on this webpage, there's a link to the recordings from the sessions. And Chuck and representatives from the city and county and Jessica all did presentations and went through each project. So these proposals are like a pre-proposal submission, and the final submissions won't be submitted until August. So currently we're having an open comment session where people can provide comments, and here you can see on the screen of how you can provide comments on the different proposals. It's going to be open, the comment period is going to be open until the end of May, and we had a tremendous response for the sessions. We had, as Sandy said, 64 on the first night and 74 on the second night. And there's on the website, there's a table with links to each project. So we've received over 100 comments and questions so far. We're gonna combine them all together, kind of put them into categories, and then have general answers to the questions and post that on the website after the comment period is closed. So it won't be until the first or second week in June that that'll be out. It'll summarize kind of the feedback that we got. So if you click on these links, and I'm going to click on one it's received a lot of comments. So if you, each link you can click on, and it'll open up a page that Nick created. Nick was kind enough to make these really nice pages for us that show a map of the project and kind of what's proposed for it. And then there's a short description. The cost estimates are really rough because this is just a pre-submission. They haven't, worked everything out yet. So the costs are going to change. And the needs that that each project addresses. And then the concerns are concerns that we've heard from the community so far. So this will be added to as well. TJPDC is submitting this one on behalf of the county. So that would be if you had comments, you send them to me Sandy at TJPDC. And then we have a section here where you can provide a comment and submit it. They don't get posted immediately because we screen them. And then here's the comments. You can read the comments that other people have submitted. So we're collecting comments via phone, email. When people registered for the webinar, they had an opportunity to comment, and during the workshop sessions, there was a Q&A box that we also received comments through that as well, and answered questions during the webinar.
Can I cut in to ask? So, if we had comments on these, would you want us to submit them through that same comment portal, or do you want us to send them to Jessica so there'd be like a separate batch of CTAC specific input?
I think CTAC specific input would be more, better, more influential. I don't know if Sandy or Jessica have any other, oh shoot, you guys, Sorry, hold on.
I think it depends on if you want to submit it as a, resident, or if you want to submit it as, in a more formal capacity.
I guess I'm just wondering if we're already supposed to send any thoughts on the tip and work program, if we could just send comments on this too as part of that.
Yeah,
email.
absolutely. I'm happy to take those emails.
Yes.
Question to the group then. Is there any kind of projects that popped up to you that you would like to ask questions about while we have everyone here?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
As a planning commissioner, even though I don't know that it's really going to have any bearing as an Albemarle County Planning Commissioner, I'm receiving a great deal of comments, both pro and con, for the Route 20 shared use path. And I have a question for Chuck. 10 years ago, I don't think something like this would have even been considered by FHWA and the crash zone standards and those sorts of things. So, and I applaud the flexibility in highway design that's occurred over the last 25 years. But having said that, and driving this a great deal, I'm just wondering about the separation of pedestrians and bicycles from 45-mile-an-hour trucks and cars.
Yeah, we're taking that into consideration, and we're installing curb along that entire section of road. Right now, it's an open ditch section. So as part of the project, we would be raising the median as opposed to having a lower depressed median. And we'll have to work with the tree groups and the Journey Through Hallowed Ground folks to make sure we can be responsible about the vegetation and the trees and make sure those are taken care of appropriately if the project is funded and moved forward. So I know that Jessica is working with them through the committee, Bike Ped committee, and trying to, as that process, if it's funded, moves forward, we'll bring them into the discussion and work with them as much as we can to preserve as much of that, relocate it, replant, whatever we need to do to try to preserve the aesthetics of that area as much as possible. But I mean, we're limited as to where we can put the facility along that corridor. The median was one of the options because you don't have to cross bikes and pedestrians across a free flow interchange ramp, which is that's going to create more problems than what this would create. So that's why we ended up opting for this solution as opposed to some of the other options that we looked at.
Do you have any guess as to how it's going to rank?
Depends on the cost.
Thanks.
I mean, the part of it is I know originally we were looking at using the existing southbound Route 20 bridge to cross the road because we got it restricted down to one lane. But in evaluating the structure, we're going to have to redo the deck and to end up putting the barrier across that bridge. So we're looking at options, and we're finding it's probably going to be cheaper to put a new bridge between the two bridges and run it straight up the median all the way, as opposed to transitioning out into the road and then back onto the median. So those are some of the options we're looking at right now.
Thank you.
But those are going to be costly items, and some of that stuff we're still working through the cost.
Just to be clear, this is the Route 20 shared use path.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the project we're talking about.
Along the center of Route 20 from Druid, I think it's Druid Road inside the city, all the way to PVCC and the Saunders Trailhead.
Is there any way in which we could learn how we might avoid cutting down all the recently planted trees? I've seen that as a concern.
That is a big concern raised by many people in the community and many of the groups that work to get those trees planted. So we are trying to work with them to see what options we have to preserve the trees, possibly relocate some of them, or as many of them as we can, replant some of them along the corridor, because it's still going to be a wide corridor that once the trail's in there, you're still going to have plenty of opportunities to have a tree-lined corridor that would be provide the same accommodation as it does now, but you could also have bikes and peds in the median, in addition to the trees.
Okay. Only one other question. Is there a standard width for this path that we're looking at that we're having to follow that would require?
We're looking at a 10-foot path with 2-foot shoulders. So basically a 14 feet wide area. It can be reduced. We can go down to 8 feet, but we want to try to make it as pleasant and comfortable trail for all the users to utilize. So what we're looking at is mainly a 10-foot paved surface for the facility.
And would there be any appreciable difference in the impact on that greenery that people are, providing so many comments on? If one was to go down to that lower or smaller side, excuse me.
Yes, we haven't really gotten into that part of it yet. We may be able even to meander it through. We're just not at that stage in the detail of the design yet.
Oh, okay.
And that's something that if we get funded, we can work through going forward. We do have the bridge piers on 64 that are in the middle of the median that we're going to have to go around also. So we'll just have to work if we can get it funded, we'll work through those items with the community to come up with a concept that's going to be hopefully acceptable to everybody.
Cool. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask for the hydraulic 29 package, is the $18 million the leftover plan to all be applied to that one project to bring the cost down to, I guess it'd be $6 million or so? Or is that kind of split up? Yeah.
That was the consensus, and that's what we were planning to do. I haven't heard otherwise. So
Yes.
I know they did submit the Hillsdale South project too. And we're actually working on those final estimates now for those projects. So we should have something more finalized on those in the next couple of weeks. We got the initial results of the VISM analysis and with the simulation. So we're going to be putting that together and putting it out on the website and possibly engaging the group again for another meeting probably in the next month.
Not to belabor you with any more questions, but on the Hillsdale Drive South extension and with the roundabouts, I heard that during the one meeting I went to for MPO a month or two ago before all COVID hit, there was questions about how we could have something that would interrupt the flow that would allow those roundabouts to occur. I believe that there was questions about that. Did we ever come around to finding out how the flow of traffic could be interrupted to allow those roundabouts to work?
When we did the analysis, there's some software. When I followed up with Baker, the consultant that did the roundabout analysis, they were using the 2010 software as opposed to the HCM6 software. When we revised the analysis, it actually ended up working fine compared to the signal, and we didn't have that problems. In the final presentation, or the second presentation, it shows the results of that analysis, which is much better than the first analysis that was done. So we've worked through most of those issues that we originally had. We've also modified the concept to try to shrink the footprint a little bit from what it was initially proposed in the initial last round of smart scale, to where it fits in that space a little bit better and has less right-of-way impacts. So hopefully right now we've got a good concept that's going to work well for the area and for both bikes and pedestrians.
That's good news. Thank you.
Any other questions about the process or any of the projects, or how, any other questions about the public meetings that we had? Okay, so as we discussed, if you have any comments that you want to make on any of the projects just as yourself, you can go ahead and make those comments directly on the webpage that Lucinda showed you. But if you want to make a comment as a member of CTAC, which would carry more weight, please email me for that. Okay.
Hey, Jessica, do you want to show them the projects from the 14th as well? I don't know if they might have comments about those, and I can talk to them since Kevin's not available.
Sure.
The city projects, I know a little bit about some of them, but not as much as the folks from the city do.
Lucinda, you're still sharing your screen. Can you move us to the city and county projects page?
Oh, yeah, sure. Here's the city and county projects.
So if anyone had any questions about these projects, Chuck is offering to answer some questions right now. And if not, or if you think of any questions after this meeting, again, please feel free to email me and I can pass those along to either Chuck or the city or the county folks. Okay. All right, Lucinda, I think we're all set.
A very quick question about
Sure.
the Belmont Bridge. I know it's not on here, but the Belmont Bridge and the 250 East improvements and coordinating those two projects.
Chuck, is that something you're familiar with?
A little bit. I know something about the East project. It's the High Street East project. Goes from 9th Street around to 10th Street, I think. And Belmont Bridge basically ties into it. I know that the High Street project is doing a lane reduction, a road diet, so to speak, for that facility, and adding bike and pedestrian facilities. It's going to be one lane in each direction with a center turn lane at some of the intersections, and bike lanes, and then I think wider sidewalk on the east side. And I think the Belmont Bridge project is they're looking at doing a similar type of project and reducing the width of the bridge to provide the additional better bike and pedestrian accommodations across the bridge. So they should marry up nicely. I don't know specifically because I haven't seen the plans on either project recently, so I don't know exactly all of the details. But does that answer your question?
No, well, yes, partially. No, what I'm interested in from a regional vehicle movement standpoint is actually the 250 east of Pantops. And
okay,
I've seen startup dates for that and the Belmont Bridge at about the same time. Because we have so much commuting traffic from the south on Route 20 and from the east from Fluvanna that goes over to 64 and then 250, I'm concerned about what kind of congestion issues we might have in that greater Belmont, Woolen Mills area from how vehicles are going to try to find their way through.
Yeah, okay, that's a separate, yeah, I understand what he's referring to the DDI project conversion at Shadwell. is the project. I guess they're going about the same time because they've got it. It went design build, so they're doing it all as a package project where the Belmont Bridge is a regular design bid build, and it's actually getting ready to go to advertisement, or is it just been awarded? I don't know all the details, but I'm not sure how that's all going to be managed. I know we're not planning to close or restrict any of the lanes with regards to the DDI, similar to the DDI conversion that was done at Zion's Crossroads. They maintained all of the lanes for the traffic in all the directions all the time. So we're going to end up doing the same thing at that location for that project. So I don't see that's going to be, shouldn't be a hindrance to traffic congestion beyond what it already is out there on Pantops.
Tim, if I might, or Chuck, if I might just chime in, because I had those same concerns, Tim, and asked the project manager, Chuck, I can't remember who.
Hal Jones was managing it, but I don't know.
It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't Hal.
Yeah, who underneath him is actually overseeing it?
Yeah, it was Hal was in the conversation, but the project manager was there, and he confirmed that both of those right now were scheduled to be under construction at the same time. And
okay.
he confirmed what Chuck said, is that the intent is to keep all of the lanes of 250 open. But my concern is, even everybody knows, once you put orange cones and barrels out, you start to get a slowdown of traffic. And I believe it's going to have a major impact on 5th Street coming into town. People will come that way to get around both 250 coming in as well as Avon.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a pretty big concern.
I don't know. I can't really answer that question. I mean, we're going to do what we can do to keep the traffic moving. Part of the problem with Pantops is it's not necessarily the interchange as much as it is 250 itself. You've got 250 east of there. You've got three two-lane roads dumping into one two-lane road. So that backs it up from Shadwell all the way to the interchange. And then at the interchange, you've got the interstate and people coming in 250 all merging together. So from there in, it's always congested. And it's been that way for a significant amount of time. And this project's not going to change that. And that's going to be an existing condition. You're right. I think some of them may shift over to 5th Street. From Route 20, but I don't necessarily think you're going to have people from Pantop shifting over, but definitely from Route 20. Although to get to Belmont Bridge, you've got a 2-lane road on Monticello Avenue that goes up to Avon Street, where you make the right to go across Belmont Bridge. That's still got some capacity constraints, so you can't really get as much volume to Belmont that you're going to lose. It just depends on how much lane restrictions they put on Belmont Bridge. But they should maintain 1 lane of traffic in each direction all the time, so it should function the way it functions now for the most part.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments? Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, we cannot vote on, but I just want to put the idea in your heads, membership. So right now, membership for CTAC is on a rolling basis. So you get appointed from either the city, the county, or the MPO, and then you are in your position for 3 years from that date. That means that we have people starting and stopping their terms all over the place, and it's been really difficult to keep track of. I really appreciate all of you giving me all of the information that you did, indicating when you were appointed and when your term ends, because that was information that we didn't have all in one place as, you know, staff transitions happened. But even so, now that we have all the information in one place, it's still a tricky thing to manage. And it just means that we're constantly on the lookout for new members. We're constantly introducing new people to how CTAC works, and all of that stuff. And it is still hard to manage. So what I'd really like this committee to consider is moving everyone over to a single start date and end for their term, because it would just make it a lot easier to manage moving forward. So in order to do that, that's something that we would have to have, according to our bylaws, a 2/3 vote in favor of, because it would be changing our bylaws. So it's something at this point to just think about, and I will make sure to add it to our agenda for our next meeting, hopefully when we'll have enough people there to make a decision on that with a formal vote. But did anyone have any initial questions on that? Yes, Tim.
Again, the issue of the appointees that are representing different bodies, you'll have to coordinate the dates, and it won't be able to be a 3-year run if it's an Albemarle County Planning Commissioner, because of the elections and people filling out other people's terms. So that position, and I would imagine other appointed positions, are not going to work that easily.
Okay, so we'll definitely look more closely at the appointed positions in particular.
And I just wanted to ask, so would some of the years still be staggered, but everybody would like start January 1?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't really clear on that. But yeah, I would just like to have, perhaps it's January. We know that that is a start and end date for folks, as opposed to just being random throughout the year. But we don't need everyone we wouldn't necessarily have everyone start like 3 years from tomorrow and go for that. There would be some staggering, but it would at least be more consistent throughout the year.
I do think with Tim's comment, he's right. Not arguing to choose a constant date to begin. I think it would probably have to be like a February or March date, because like in Albemarle, new Board of Supervisor members get appointed. They may appoint a planning commission member who would then be represented on this board. Well, they make those changes after January 1st. So it's just the type of things you'll have to consider.
And technically, those that are continuing on, we can't continue on. We have set dates that end at the end of December after those elections. And so, as you know, there's often, as Chip has just said, a month or two hiatus between appointments. Again, that's only happening every 2 years because the staggering of supervisor elections every 2 years. So it shouldn't be problematic, especially if you would choose that January 1st date and just realize that there will most likely not be a representative occasionally in January.
So I think right now I'm looking at the website, we've got 4 vacancies. Yes.
Yes, so we have 4 vacancies, sort of. One thing I'll clarify is that according to our bylaws, if you are a CTAC member and your term expires, you actually can continue to serve as a voting member of CTAC until your seat is replaced. So if your term has ended and you still want to participate, you can as a voting member until we find someone new. So yes, 4 vacancies-ish.
Unless you're appointed by the city or county, then it's the appointing body. They also have to agree to you staying on.
So that's something we should talk about a little. You definitely know more than I do, Chip. But I'm just reading the bylaws.
No. Yeah, I mean, it's just, these are all those little just in small details.
Okay.
That we just have to consider in this kind of a change, but I think it would be really beneficial.
I think it's really good too. You need to realize that those 2 positions, when they are vacant, those individuals are not going to on their own be able to make the decision to continue. And it's just easier to have them vacant for that month until they're filled.
Great. So it sounds like we have some really knowledgeable folks who can help us work out these details. So I'm looking forward to doing that with you guys next meeting. All right, any other questions, concerns? We don't have any members of the public, so we don't need to finish with that. All right, we're all set. Thank you for sticking around, guys. Thank you for attending our meeting, and I will follow up with an email with all of those requests for recommendations that I'm hoping to receive from all of you. Thanks again.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.